from Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on our YouTube show, Jen Taub Live. Jen, nice to see you, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing better than the last time we spoke. Good to see you, Dean.
Good to see you. I'm glad you're doing a little better. I know it's personal things with family and won't get into it, but look, before you came on, you heard the last caller, Mary. Before what led all of this for the first part of the show, I talked about Donald Trump's comments today about grocery prices. And the point was, and he said it's much harder to get them down. I'm like, he's not going to lose any of the MAGA faithful. They didn't vote for him for grocery prices, folks. It was sexism and racism intersecting. That's part of it. Some people voted for Trump for different reasons. I get that. I'm talking about the MAGA core. They don't care. That's what they're about. And I said, corporate media, early on, slightly touch on it, but it had just avoided the topic. And I gave people statistics about how, for example, it's part of our society, this patriarchal mindset. Of the Fortune 500 companies, only 52 are headed by women out of 500. The S&P 500, which is a different 500, it's 8% of the CEOs are women. And even though there are more women graduating grad school now and college, you still have studies showing that there is various reasons why women don't get the top rung. But one of the three reasons, there was a Harvard Law School study that I quoted from earlier in the show. The third one was a tendency to discriminate against women that can lead to the deliberate avoidance of promoting women to leadership positions, even if it comes at the expense of a company's profitability. That was one of the three reasons they've found. So what is your take on it? And not just the election also, but the bigger sense of our society?
Yeah, I do think that women do face all kinds of glass ceilings. And I do understand, I'm glad you mentioned that study because I've often heard that people say, oh, it's irrational. If women, are really paid less than men, then why wouldn't businesses just fill themselves up with women in these jobs? Because if they're more qualified, they could do more for less. And the answer is because it's not just about money. Money isn't the only thing that motivates people. It's domination and hierarchy. And,
Mhm.
just quoting Isabel Wilkerson, this notion of caste. Caste is very powerful. And of course, it's intersectional, right? And it goes across class, it goes across race, and it goes across gender. And one of the biggest caste divides throughout history and across societies is that gender divide. And it ties to some degree in a really essentialistic way to the fact that women have bodies that can give birth and that incapacitates them during that period of time. And while children are young and this desire to nurture the infants. And again, I'm being very essentialistic. Biology is not destiny, but I'm speaking sort of historically and right. And this is
Sure.
why this controlling women's reproductive freedom and not allowing them to decide if and when and how to have children does set us back to an era of biological essentialism where men are dominant because women need to depend upon them. Again, I'm speaking historically and generally, need to depend upon them for protection, for food, for et cetera, right? And all of this is to say, I don't knock people who have divided gender roles along traditional lines, and it may make a sense for a lot of people, but for others, it doesn't work that way. But I think at its core, what the MAGA base does want is at least, it's this idea that at least, even if a man's being put down at work, at least he comes home to his so-called castle and he has someone he can dominate and feel better than. It's quite similar to,
Hmm.
that whole Southern strategy, this idea that, if you keep the caste system, if a white person, even if they're low on the class hierarchy, knows at least they're better than any black person, I'm putting it quotes, at least that creates, it allows for some lack of social unrest. And so that to control women's not just reproductive freedom, but free labor, et cetera, you can see why there would be a class of people who would love that. So,
And
there you go.
right. And Jennifer just brought up a great point that I even forgot to bring up in the early part. There's no, you've got laws now in 14 states that ban abortion at day one of conception, where these men who have passed these laws to oppress women in 2023 and 2024, they passed them. That is the physical manifestation of sexism. It is saying, here's my beliefs, and now I'm going to force women against their will to carry a fetus to term. So Sexism's alive and well, and those laws show that. And these are laws passed now, not 1824, but in 2024 they were passed. And I cited some other studies for people. Not that Harvard publication, they had an article, underrepresentation of women CEOs, and they had three. They went sort of aggregated, but they looked at other studies, and one of the reasons was discrimination. Another was the unique family situation that some women choose to leave the workforce. We understand that. Another weird one, though, was that women are viewed as having different skill sets that don't, such as teamwork and communication, while men thrive in hard skills like analysis, strategy, and execution. And that's the reason they become chosen for CEOs. I'm like, that one seems like bullshit to me. That the other ones, discrimination, yes, and women, if they make a choice, I understand that they leave the workforce, that's different. But that women have a different skill set that doesn't lend them to being good CEOs makes zero sense to me. But you're a woman. Why don't
You
you
know,
tell
it's
us?
yes, and I represent all women and speak for all
You're
women.
doing this.
No, I mean, it's we saw it with the Harris campaign and before that with Hillary Clinton's campaign. To be a woman who has power in a public arena is very hard needle to thread. And it's I mean, I could just quote the Barbie movie. I don't think I need to do that. I'm forgetting what the is her first name, the actress Mercedes somebody. Anyway, she was fabulous
America
in
Ferrara. America
America
Ferrara.
Ferrera. So
Yeah. I interviewed her. That's right. Mhm.
it's very hard to find a sweet spot of being a good manager, making, being in control and assertive without being a bitch. Also, and I've worked in businesses where women had a lot of authority. When I worked at Fidelity Investments, a part of that is the owner, it's a family business, if you can believe it, right? And the patriarch, Ned Johnson, was passing the reins to his daughter, Abby Johnson, at that time, who's now in charge. I found there to be a lot of equality and a lot of, promotion with merit, a lot of women executives and so on. But I wonder if it's just a different situation in other places. But generally speaking, yes. And I think it's not just, I think it starts to become norms. Everyone's always saying norms are good, but some of the norms that people are used to is this idea that women are a certain way and men are other ways. And for example, that's why women become head of HR. Oh, women are good with human resources, and so on. I mean, there was a lawsuit years ago, I think it was Merrill Lynch, it could have been another large bank, where there was a woman executive who either been demoted or fired or what have you, or she'd been as a money manager because she's too rough around the edges, too tough, too swore too much,
Uh,
and I think, all this stuff comes into play, I think. And I also, let me say, there's
sure.
another thing that's really terrible. You know, I thought that I was immunizing myself and insulating myself from discrimination by like checking all the boxes, right? I'm not saying I'm an idiot, but I'm saying I was smart, I was intellectual in terms of like any normal kid. Like, well, I love to read, I love to think, I love to study, but I made a deliberate choice to aim for the Ivy League, even though I was a Midwestern kid. I made a deliberate choice, after, having a lot of fun in college. At some point, I said, you know what, I better actually crack the books and study for the LSAT at that point, and then I got into Harvard. Like, I was thinking, if I get every single credential, then no one will be able to question that I'm not a dummy. That will, before I
Hmm.
walk in the door, they'll respect me. And I would say, for the most part, that's played out, except it's actually, I think I've mentioned it's been the reverse. There are so many men in particular who are, I don't know what it is, but maybe they didn't feel the pressure to go get these kinds of degrees. But I have gotten digs at me from men who have authority over me about my degrees. Like not everyone can go to Harvard. It was the dean of my business school where I used to work would
Wow.
constantly do that. And I don't want to go through every example, but you sort of get this, you get this idea that it's like they think that I'm this rich bitch and it was handed it to me, right? So there was not a way.
Oh, I
There's
see. Yeah.
not any way. Same thing, it's like black women, oh, you're too uppity, right? You know what this is, right? They're
Hmm.
supposed to be in a place, and there's this idea of being in service of others, not in service of yourself, right? It's the whole, I used to call it, there's a whole virgin whore complex thing in literature
Hmm.
and in life, that women are supposed to be either the Virgin Mary or they're terrible. Like, there is no space in between. It's the same thing around capitalism. women are supposed to be either Mother Teresa or, completely without need for any kind of material comfort, or they are the devil wears Prada, evil, corporate, what is it, girl boss bitch. So
Right.
women, even though men have thrived under capitalism to some degree, the minute a woman tries to do that, they say, well, you've been oppressed, you've been low on the hierarchy. How dare you make a little buck? It's like women are held to a higher standard. So it's very hard to succeed inside of those systems, I would say.
And one of the other data points I gave to people was that recent studies showing asking men, would you prefer a male boss or a female boss? And what is shown, there's been, at least in response to surveys, about 2/3 of men said they don't care at all now. But of those who care, 2-1 want a male boss. So they're
Women
doing that
too,
in the
though.
and there are women, as I mentioned, that it wasn't like this kind of divide, but there are it's part of our society. That was my bigger point, that the election for president is picking the CEO of the country the same way the choice of a board of directors or in a corporation is picking the CEO of that company. It's just a
That's right.
manifestation of the same issues we have. We have an issue with women being in leadership that troubles some people. And in a close election, and this was a close election, Vice President Harris
Right.
only lost by about 160,000 votes if you put the key
Oof.
states together.
Right.
That all you need are a few percentage of people to go like, I don't want a female president. I'm just don't, or I don't want a black female president. Maybe I would have wanted a white female president. And that, and there's still I'm not discounting the need for Democrats to talk about economic policies that are populist, that help the working class and leaning into it. That's our party. And we're not
Of
known for that right
course.
now. We talk about that, but that's not what we're known
Right.
for. So, but my bigger point was corporate media has not talked about the sexism and racism that plays a role because it makes them uncomfortable, or it makes their viewers uncomfortable, or it makes the anchors or Joe Scarborough uncomfortable to talk about it. It's all got to be, what it's got to be. Like,
Well,
things are
it's so
complex.
hard
It's not easy.
because
There's nothing easy.
nothing's easy. It's difficult because now we've
Mhm.
banned the words intersectionality. I mean, I think everything
Have
is
we? Oh
difficult
no.
to talk about. No, I mean, I think it's not simple, but to pretend that certain things weren't factors. Everyone, I don't love when people say, it's like everything reinforces people's priors, so to speak. If she had won, everyone would say, aha, it's because of this. It's like
Right.
really, it's like confirmation bias. I have never run for office. I haven't worked on a political campaign. I'm not going to sit around and say and do some kind of post-mortem from my armchair about what went wrong in this election when it was so close. And elections are always close. This election was closer for her than, I mean, than it was. She got more votes than Bill Clinton. He didn't even win when he won I know he won the electoral college, but he didn't win the popular vote. This is not, and he ultimately won because of Ross Perot, probably as a
Mhm.
third party candidate.
Yep.
Like, if we're such morons, I see through it. Like, if she won by 5 votes, everyone would say, this is what they did right. I'm just so sick of people prognosticating. And I know that we need to do better in the future on and try to get a candidate who can win. There's no question. But what I'm amazed at is the minute an election is over, everybody forgets about the swing states. Everybody's sitting
Yeah.
and no offense, like in New York City, whether it's you or me, I could be right now, I'm in Massachusetts, sometimes I'm in Michigan. I can sit around with my own perspective. But why don't I get off my ass and actually find out what voters in those swing states said? Because they were the
Well, I took them on
ones
the phone.
who
I
decided.
took them on the
Oh, what did
phone.
they
They
say?
call
What did they
in.
say?
They
Which
No,
one?
all
So
different
only the
reasons.
pro. Oh, okay. All of them? Colin? Even
No,
Trump
they're
voters?
different. No, well, sometimes they call. They don't call me as much. They like to call Michelangelo Signorelli the show before me and fight with him. But I tend to have conversations that doesn't. They don't like that much. I guess they want to fight. They're calling to fight. But it's funny. You mentioned the election afterwards. How there's these crazy autopsies now. It's like the reverse. There's a famous expression attributed to John Kennedy, but I don't think it actually wasn't Kennedy. Success has a thousand fathers, and failure is an orphan. But with campaigns, it's the opposite. When you fail, there are a
Oh,
thousand opinions on why you fail. Like, if you won, it's for this, it's whatever it is. Like, if she had won, they would have said it's because of this or that. But when you lose in politics, there's a million reasons, people, and everyone thinks they have the right reason. It's an amalgam of things. I mean, for certain people, it was one thing. For others, it could have been groceries. For others, they wouldn't vote for a black woman. For some, they love Trump. They're right wing, whatever it might be. There's no simple answer. And what annoys me so much are the
right.
conversations on corporate media that try to simplify something that is not simplistic. It's just not. Not in a close election like this. Trump got 49.8%. She lost the popular vote by 1.5%. It was very, very close. Electoral college a little bit worse for her, but
And right,
it
he
was
got a
close.
plurality also. He didn't get a majority.
No,
Right.
he did not. And of all registered voters, he only got 32%, because a third of Americans still didn't vote in this election. The turnout was 66%, slightly less than 2020. So Trump won with 32% of registered voters. That's who voted for him. It's unbelievable in our country. We all thought this election like it's the end of times. And a third of Americans like, it means nothing. And you're like, what have we done wrong? So let's talk. I'm chatting with our friend Jennifer Taub, law professor. So I wanted to talk to you about a few things. One was a topic we discussed yesterday and ad nauseum forever, it seems like, but lately, where's the Democratic leadership in taking the fight to Trump? Like, what is going on? We have a few fighters, but I mean, an organized, here is the message. Here is a playbook for 2.0 resistance. Here's what we're going to be on. Instead, I see some Democrats fighting, others trying to find common ground with Trump, others saying, let's
Oh,
pardon him. I'm like, what have you done as a party? What is wrong with you? You told us he was a fascist threat to democracy before the election. Literally, you told us he was an extremist who was going to end our democracy. Now you're like, if we can find common ground, that's not bad. Well, were you lying to us or not? I don't think they were lying. This is all politics to them, to some of them, not all of them.
so I know that you didn't mention Ro Khanna by name, but I
No,
felt like I
I
heard
like
that.
Ro a lot, and he's trying to
I
find
do too.
Elon Musk common
No,
ground, and
so
it frustrates me.
okay, here's what I would do if I were in charge, right? Even though I was
Mhm.
uncomfortable doing a postmortem, now I'm in charge of the entire Democratic Party. So excuse my
Good.
arrogance. I would pull a Tim Russert. Remember Tim Russert with his whiteboards? I would make
Sure.
a whiteboard, like a really big one. It doesn't have to be a whiteboard, a big chart that everyone has. And it was like, promise number one, lower grocery prices. How are we doing on that one? Promise two, deport a lot of people. That's a problem. How's he doing on that one? The top 10 shit that he promised, the
Mhm.
good and the bad. Tariffs, they won't raise prices. How's that going? Trade war. Like, I mean, why not start with what he said and do this repetitive thing? And maybe I'll just start doing that on my YouTube show every Monday
Sure.
through Friday at 8:30 a.m. Gen Talk Live. I know you already said that, but
All right. That's
like
good.
where
Plug
that
it.
is, I'm going to try. And to me, leadership exists outside of politics. You, Dean Obeidallah, are a leader, and I know there's another way to pronounce your surname. What's the other way again?
Obeidallah. Oh, there's Obeidallah, there's Obeidallah.
I
There's
like
all
that.
different ways. We've
Obeidallah.
Americanized
It's
it to
Obeidallah.
Obeidallah.
It's Obeidallah. That's another
Obeidallah
way.
is how when I go to South Asian events, that's how it's Obeidallah.
I
So
mean, the
it's
one thing,
servant
my
of
friend,
God.
that I'm happy,
Good.
the one thing, oh, it's lovely, that I'm happy about is we're still talking about this stuff, and you can still try to have influence on the outside. Just like you said, there's corporate media, there's corporate politics. And I think we
Hmm.
need from the outside, from the grassroots, and from I think a lot of governors have a good idea. And I don't know. I mean, I wish could like get my foot in the door for messaging. Like, should I talk to? Like, who's in charge of shit over there now? Because I do think this would be a great idea. A giant like whiteboard or project. You just project it on the side of the Capitol. How is he doing? And why not do it? Like, bring it to the 21st
Sure.
century on TikTok, on YouTube. The checklist. Like, where am I? Hire me. I'll do it. I would do it for free. I just don't think that the leadership needs not just leaders, but a message. Pelosi used to say, you need the message, you need to mobilize, and you need money, right? Where is the message? I don't know.
There is no unified Democratic message. And just so it's clear, Jen, and for everyone else, if Donald Trump insanely or Republicans said something that we could agree on, Doesn't mean Democrats shouldn't vote for it. You're not looking for common ground, but say they say we're going to do raise the national minimum wage. Well, that's been something we're really about. So, okay, because all of a sudden Trump's leaning into populism. Well, we could support that. That's different. But it's different than saying, literally telling us for the entire campaign, and I went through it yesterday and played campaign commercial from Biden. Trump's a threat to our nation, extremism. He's a threat to our republic and our freedoms. And after the election, that's
Right.
gone. He's not a fascist anymore. He won, and you know what? We got to be better on policy. Our brand is broken. The guy is still a fascist. The man still embraces violence. He's about to pardon the terrorists who beat up police officers and literally just about kill them. He's about to do that. He pledged that again today in the
It
new interview in Time magazine. Where are Democrats on that stuff? This is insane to me.
it's insane because even saying out loud, "Oh, we have a bad message," is insane. Again, what are the policy? If you care about ordinary people, what are the policies he promised us? The good and the bad, and say, what's happening on that front? What is he doing? You know,
Right.
I
That's a
just
good.
don't get
I
it.
like
But
that.
thanks.
I like. I mean, he's not running for reelection legitimately. He may never leave office, but he's not going to be able to run unless the. We won't have to get into the 22nd Amendment. We'll be talking about it another time. We'll get to the 22nd Amendment. I saw that you had posted online a little bit about today. President Biden announced commuting the prison sentences for nearly 1,500 people and pardoning 39 others in the White House, the largest act of clemency ever done in one day, in a single day, not on a whole term, in a
Right.
single day by an American president. And I just want to get your reaction to that because I saw you were amplifying it on social media.
I love it. I love it. I also like what in his statement that he said that was picked up by the news media, which is in addition to being sort of the largest grant of clemency, he is arguably the first president who decided to grant clemency to specific categories of people, such as people who, were using marijuana, nonviolent crimes, and things like that. Also, he granted clemency to, or pardons, I'm sorry, pardons to people who were caught up in the former Department of Defense policy that prohibited homosexuality in the military. And they had
Mhm.
those charges. He was pardoning those. And so I think that it's the quantity as well as the quality of these. And I hope he moves forward. I'm seeing a lot of people say free Leonard Peltier, and I'm wondering, how is he still possibly in prison? This is a man who is part of the American Indian movement of the 1970s. Enough already. Why is the guy still in prison? I mean, there's some sentences that are too long, and I think there's questions about whether he committed the crime that he was convicted for. But I just think in the nature of healing, it's time to let him out of prison as one example.
So it was a big step today, and I'm sure he will pardon more people. Where do you come down on the idea of the what they call preemptive pardons? I don't think that's actually the correct word, but the media's use that term. Him just pardoning people like Liz Cheney, um, Adam Kinzinger, let's say, Democrats, Benny Thompson, who said today he would accept a pardon if Biden would give him one. That's what he told. It was on MSNBC. What do you think about that?
Well, for those who would accept the pardon, I think it's a really wise idea. If I were President Biden or advising him, I would recommend it for the entire January 6th committee,
Hmm.
for Anthony Fauci, for Hillary Clinton. And here's why. It's really hard to say no to Donald Trump. And we could have a repeat of the Saturday Night Massacre. I mean, first of all, Cash Patel, you don't need to hold the guy back. I mean, you don't need to, I'm sorry, encourage the guy. He's like ready to go. But I'm not so sure about
Okay.
Pam Bondi as the attorney general. I think, it's like Odysseus who tied him, in the Greek mythology, ties himself to the mast so he won't hear the siren song. I think you should tie Pam Bondi's hand so she can't pursue this vendetta. I think it's bad for America. I think it's bad for her and for, it creates, I think, more division in society to leave these people out there. I don't think this should be at the top of Donald Trump's agenda, and I would love to have it taken off his agenda by pardons. That is my view.
It's Look, we never had someone who was nominated to be an FBI director, who had openly pledged to prosecute the political opponents and members of the media, specifically members of the media as well, like Kash Patel. It's unthinkable. This is complete, and he's not qualified in any way to be the head of a huge agency like the FBI, not at all. And so it's a dangerous man that Trump wants to put in there. Last thing I have to get your, I saw you made the Daily Gen on the tale of two victims, but let's just talk about Luigi and the response to him has been folk hero status. I mean, it really is. I had my friend Tom Hartman on yesterday talking about like Bonnie and Clyde and John Dillinger, who robbed the banks. And the killing of a CEO has continued even to this day. I see things online. Um, most people denouncing the actual violence, but saying, let's have a conversation about healthcare. Some are not having a problem with the violence. That's wrong. You don't kill Brian Thompson. The guy, I could hate what they're doing, but just with that said, healthcare companies are killing people, and something needs to be done to address that. So, but what do you just think? He's become like this bizarre celebrity, Luigi, where he's talked about, and there's the sex appeal quality that people are talking about as well. Even Jimmy Kimmel was making jokes about it 2 nights ago in his monologue. I'm like, wow, this really has transcended what the act was.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me, if you'll allow for this
Sure.
analogy, to what happened around October 7th. And I think you and I see the same thing. There are some people who have given up so much hope that they are willing to support, for example, the members of Hamas who parachuted into Israel. This to me is very similar. Like you and I can completely condemn that. We, find that horrific. And at the same time, understand the frustrations of the Palestinian people as well as the harm caused by, this current Israeli administration and the history of pain everywhere, right?
Hmm.
I make that analogy because I'm equally horrified by this murder um, of this CEO, just as much as I'm horrified by the very same day the stabbing of the migrant kids whose names we don't know because they are
Right.
migrant kids, right? So this goes back to our story about caste, right? Who the nature of the victim helps predict how we're going to respond. And I think that depending on, I think to step back with all the compassion we can muster and say, look, people die because of the decisions that someone like Brian Thompson made. And people are, I think, generally saying they don't see how, this is something, you talk about with white collar crime. What's the difference between, yes, pulling the trigger is murder, but also denying coverage helps facilitate killing. And there are people saying these are morally equivalent. Um, and I don't, again, that is not, to me, it reminds me of the trolley problem. Like this dude was in the real life, the famous ethical problem that if there's a trolley moving on the tracks and it's headed, you have a control of the switch and it's moving on the tracks and it's headed in a direction where it could kill a whole school bus full of kids, or if you diverted it, it would kill this one man on the track and you
Hmm.
ask, what
I
should you
don't know.
do? And most people
Right.
say, I'm not going to intervene at all because once you intervene, you've decided to kill somebody. Well, this guy seems to have done the Tarly problem. Now, the problem is killing the CEO is not going to at all help anybody in their claims, right? Now, maybe it did help prompt like Anthem Blue Cross to decide they weren't going to cut off anesthesia in the middle of surgery. But I think, you can say this is a tragedy. This guy seemed like he had some mental health lapses and it's murder is evil. And at the same time, it's not a but. And at the same time, you can recognize how many people have died because we have a ridiculous healthcare system in this country. We can hold all of that together, I think. And, I'm not going to sit here and condemn people who turned into a folk hero because people also turned, what was that kid who killed the people? Oh gosh, the kid who traveled across Kyle Rittenhouse, right?
Oh,
People
Kyle
turned
Ritten,
him
they made
into
him
a
a
folk
folk hero.
hero. I don't
And
want
Daniel
anyone turned
Penny.
into a folk hero,
Right.
right? Daniel Penny, and that, so this is, and by the way, we do this in film all the time. Right? What the fuck is Rambo? I mean, we in film create folk heroes out of people who express vengeance through violence, right? And then in real life, though, we don't like it in real life. We want people to play this out in fiction, not in real life. Well, he played it out on the street. Again, I find it horrific. Not surprising that he did it or that he's being supported. It's like the world seems like a film to people, not reality.
It's an interesting way of looking at it because in today's world, everyone has their visceral reaction to things and they're used to expressing it on social media. So if you had a small percentage, could be 1% supporting the gunman, then the media then plays a role in amplifying that. And then it starts catching on
Yes,
more and more. I mean, our corporate media, in a way, and entertainment media as well, tell us who are the worthy victims, who are worthy to have empathy for. Like you mentioned, the
right.
migrant children being killed and who aren't. And by their coverage, the newsroom, the executives have made a choice. It's up to us then on our own to make it another way. So, all right,
Well, right,
Jen,
because Jordan Neely, I know you're wrapping up, but Jordan Neely was
sure.
considered a menace. And let me just, I was reading about that again. Do you know what he was saying? He came on the subway car and said, if you don't give me money or food, I don't care if I go to jail. So why didn't the guy give him some food? Why not give him food? Why not give him $1?
I'm on the subway all the
I don't
time.
know.
I see people yell stuff all the time. And in New Yorkers,
Me
you
too.
hear people look down at your phone and they're going to walk away. And that's how it happens. Now, there are some dangerous people here and there with mental health issues who have pushed people in front of a subway.
Yes.
That's very true. But this guy, it was an odd situation where he took it upon himself. And I don't know. I mean, the weird thing is Daniel Penny was living in New York at the time, had been on the subway. He must have seen similar things. So I was wondering, like, did he see something so out of the normal that he felt he had to stand up there? He wasn't a tourist visiting us. He lived here. And
Yeah.
then there was no need for, there was no reason Jordan Neely should have been killed. And that's the one thing. The system failed him before he even got in
Right.
that subway car. And that's
That's
the
right.
bigger issue that
Right.
we live with. It's, well, Jen, so if people want to see your YouTube show, where can they go? How can they see it every day?
Just you can just go into YouTube and write Jen Taub or Jen Taub Live, or you can find me on Blue Sky where I'm also Jen Taub, Jentaub. There you go.
Check it out. How's our friend Mary doing? How's Mary Trump?
I think she's good. I don't think she can be very happy about the current situation, but there you have it.
I haven't talked to her, and since the election, I think we exchanged text messages, and that's it. I haven't talked to her. I'll have to go on her show, The Nerd Avengers, so that I can get a chance to talk to her. All right, Jen, thanks so much for spending some time with us. I really appreciate it.